big round of applause for our second-time moderator, ladies and gentlemen, Sidra Iqbal. Please give them a big round of applause. The topic this time would be Pakistan at the crossroads. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Amelia. And once again, it's a pleasure being here and to be having this conversation with the Honorable Governor. Always a pleasure to have you here as someone who can shed some light. And as you can notice in the program outline, we have been served this very delicious, very broad theme of Pakistan at crossroads. So allow me, sir, to take this liberty and perhaps define this crossroad to be, as you know, we're at the cusp of it. We feel that Pakistan has come a long way, and indeed, in the address, Professor Ehsan Iqbal elaborated on all the good things and the wonderful things that are happening in the land of the pure. And I'm sure you will have wonderful things to report back to. It's not really a matter of glass half full or half empty, but how you see things, whether or not you see a glass. So let me perhaps define this crossroads as we're at this cusp where the democratic system in Pakistan has strengthened. We have volatile arguments, but at the same time, the good thing is that the multiple, the diverse voices are being heard, and all of them find a platform to come out. Now, if this crossroads is whether or not there's a continuation of the administration, or perhaps if there's a different kind of government that comes in place, both democratic, how do you see us moving forward in the two pathways?
Thank you very much, first of all. It looks like an election promotional campaign of PMLN. Anusha Rehman, and then Professor Ehsan Iqbal, and then myself talking all the great things about this present government has done. And I think the audience must be wondering if Ehsan Iqbal, Asfar Ehsan has joined PMLN or is promoting the cause of PMLN. First of all, I think let me say something about Anusha, how well she spoke and what she has done in the last 4 or 5 years. I want to just narrate an incident. When I joined PMLN, I think she was the best sport because we worked together in the headquarters in Lahore, and she was already there and she helped me settle down. I came from the IT industry, and she was the champion of the IT cause as far as PMLN was concerned. And we were part of the manifesto team. And there were different sections of the manifesto: economy, tax reforms, energy, militancy, IT. And obviously, Anusha was responsible for the IT section. And as was the norm, that every head of the subject, once they had completed their plan, used to share with the entire manifesto team. And as she shared the IT plan, what she proposes to do in the next 5 years, everyone was just, everything was going over the head. And so someone remarked, a very senior leader remarked, Anusha, do you think people can understand all of this? And Anusha was trying to convince that this is the best plan and this is easy to understand. And after 10 minutes of arguments, I stepped in to say, here I am, having worked in IBM for 26 years, and I can't make head or tail about what you're saying. How can the common Pakistani? But it was just to say that obviously there was so much of use of technology in terms of the terms that she used, and she knew what is coming up. And she's obviously delivered most of that, at least. Coming to the question.
Yes, sir.
I thought Ehsan Iqbal, most of what I wanted to speak, Ehsan Iqbal has already spoken. But your specific question in terms of democracy. So when we talk about the future of Pakistan and the economic growth on a sustainable long-term basis, and something that Pakistan never had in the last 70 years. We had great moments, great periods of economic growth, like in the 60s, and then in the 80s, and then in the early 2000s, only to be followed by a complete meltdown. And we were, obviously, everyone comes up with reasons why the meltdown came. I mean, I'll give you the recent one. For example, 2002, 2007, we had great economic growth, or at least very reasonable economic growth in most of the years. 2008 was a complete disaster. So by the third quarter of 2008, Pakistan was going back to IMF to take a loan of $6 billion.
But sir, with 2008, the entire world went into a meltdown.
That had nothing to do with the financial crisis. Pakistan was not exactly affected the way the rest of the world was. This was all major macroeconomic indicators. The point that I'm trying to drive is that unless you have a system of governance which has a continuation, and which is the democratic system that the people of Pakistan decided way back in 1947, unless you have the continuation of the political process, you will always have these serious disruptions.
So
This is fundamental.
Yeah.
This is fundamental. So between 2008 and 2013, for the first time, Pakistan had a government which completed its tenure. We had a transition in 2013, and now almost the second government is completing its term. So this is one of the best things. And I would say, what I was saying, if we had a major impediment to a long-term economic growth, that was the lack of continuation of the political process.
Right. So let me rephrase that. So if the 2018 government is not headed by, the admin is not PMLN, how do you see Pakistan moving forward? Has that idea, जो आप खुद कह रहे थे, that the succession plan, the focus and the priority of the economic agenda, has that sunk in? Are all the political parties on the same page?
Not all the political parties are on the same page. Obviously, there is diversity of opinion. There is a different economic plan. There are political parties. I'm talking about the major political parties, the ones which have chance to come in, almost socialist in nature, some of the economic programs that they have, which is quite different from our pro-capitalist economic agenda that we have. But regardless, obviously we like to win this election as well. But regardless of the fact that whichever political party comes in power, the system must allow them to work and put in the agenda, because they would have gone to the people of Pakistan with their economic agenda. They would have convinced the people of Pakistan. And today, the good thing is that the three major political parties which are in contention today for forming the future government in Islamabad, all three of them are ruling three different provinces of Pakistan.
So they have a
So
report
you
to
have
show.
KP, one political party ruling in Punjab, another political party, and then in Sindh. So for the first time, the people of Pakistan have the kind of choice that they never had before. And this is a great thing for Pakistan. People can see the performance of each of those political parties, which was never there, and then take a decision whether which particular political party has performed better than the other, and so on.
So, Besa, my next question might be a little abrasive. I mean, as the governor of Sindh, you are obviously a symbol of the federation. And people feel that although we've had two complete democratic terms, but because of the provincial autonomy and because of the varying capacity, the federation seems to be at the weakest. This is one opinion. Do you agree with it?
It is in a way, but Pakistan was never supposed to be a strong center. This was against the basic norms of the way Pakistan consists. It has different nationalities, which is unique. This is not a norm in most part of the world, like in Germany or in Iran or in China, for example. You have China is for Chinese, Germany is for Germans. Similarly, it's the Persians which are there in Iran, but in Pakistan they are completely different nationalities. So different nationalities means that you can't afford to have a strong center dictating terms, and especially in the context of Pakistan, where strong center typically means that one province dominates and the decision making then remains within one province. And that is why it is important to devolve the responsibilities at the provincial level, and then within the provincial level down to the district level. And this is fundamental for Pakistan's future. Otherwise, if you don't do it, and that is what we saw, for example, you go back to 1958, period 1958 to 1971, when we had a military government, and typically when you have a military government, you have a strong center, and the provinces are literally out of the decision-making process. And because the strong center meant that it was ruled by the military and bureaucracy, which both come from Punjab, the provinces got weakened. And as a result, we had a disaster in the form of separation of East Pakistan, because for 13 years, they were not part of the decision-making process.
But would you say that we have clarity of direction in terms of leadership for the federal subjects? Like a lot of people critique that PMLN did not have a foreign minister for the longest of the term. In hindsight, do you think you would redo a lot of these things?
I think this is an opportunity to clarify many things. First of all, the center-province tussle equation, there are things that need improvement. When I was referring to the fact that things must devolve at the provincial level, there are areas where we think that they must come back to at the central level. But I was talking about the overall context. In terms of your statement about the not having a foreign minister, let me explain the way the constitution is built up. Because there was a feeling that you need to incorporate people from outside the parliament for key positions within the cabinet. So there was a provision, and there is a provision in the Constitution of Pakistan, that a certain number of special assistants or advisors could be taken from outside the parliament. And that, I think, that is a demand that still exists within the educated people of Pakistan, that you don't have to contest elections. There are many good people who cannot fight elections, and therefore, and under that provision, there will always be certain ministries which will be headed by people which are not part of the parliament. And therefore, what do you do? So you have an advisor on foreign affairs who has the same level as the federal minister, the same responsibilities. And I wonder, even the educated people posing that question, and I'll share that thing here with the audience. There are certain organizations where the head of the finance is called the chief financial officer, in another, the finance director, in another, accounting head or whatever. But it all depends on the responsibilities. The advisor on foreign affairs had the same responsibility as the foreign minister would have, and at the same position which is enjoyed by the foreign minister.
So in other words,
what
you didn't
what is
really
the
have an
difference?
absent foreign minister. You very much had a person and the system in place for that.
Absolutely. In fact, there was not one, there were two at that point in time, when everyone in the country was crying out that we don't have a foreign minister. We had advisor on foreign affairs, and we had special assistant to the Prime Minister on foreign affairs. And I think that was a very good combination. In what respect? Because it all boils down to whether the advisor enjoyed the same responsibilities and had the same powers as a federal minister. That is the key question.
Looking back, Zubair Saab, there's a concept that Professor Essen mentioned about punctuated equilibrium, and he spoke about forces and species who cannot adapt, they will be going extinct. Now, if we apply the same formula to the political landscape, what do you think will be going extinct in the upcoming elections?
I mean, I don't want to obviously predict the results. That is for the others to comment. Obviously, there will be intense competition, and that's good for the people of Pakistan. Please understand, it is, at the end of the day, the most important stakeholders are the people of Pakistan. And there's going to be intense competition. There's going to be a competition about how they have performed in their respective provinces. There'll be competition about the program that they will come up in the next 5 years, and it will all finally boil down to who does better marketing. Like any product or service, you have to take to the people and you have to sell it. There are products which are not the best, but they sell better because you sell them better. You have a better selling capacity or marketing capacity. So it will also depend on how well each of the political parties they have their marketing teams going around the country, and using the different mediums, electronic, social medium, going directly to the people, and so on and so forth, and make people understand in terms of the population. Unfortunately, one of the things that Mr. Ehsan Iqbal mentioned was the way the whole thing is projected in Pakistan is, and I was sharing with Anusha that the way Anusha was talking for half an hour or so, over 5-year period, I am sure the entire audience would not have the opportunity to listen on an electronic media was Anusha was talking here. I mean, because, and when we come here and speak in the language which can connect us with the corporate world, I think in most cases, whether they appreciate our performance or not, but this is far better way of communication and for the people to understand our point of view than the way our electronic media projects day in and day out. And that's what I urge the electronic media, especially coming towards the electoral process, that please allow intellectual debate about performances, debate about policies, debate about the plans. That's what the people of Pakistan would be most interested, rather than the way the whole thing is conducted in a manner that everyone is shouting at each other.
But Zubair Saab, tell me something. There seems to be a built-in disadvantage. The 60-day period, like looking at the current timelines, 30 of those days are going to be Ramzan. With the long fasting hours, do you think people will be a receptive audience to the narrative?
Again, the point is, it depends on how well you use your marketing tools. Ramzan, in some ways, makes you to go to people at more times, times than the norm. For example, most people are up at night playing cricket or going around shopping.
Will you be hosting
and
a lot of people for Sehri then?
So you have to devise a marketing plan on how best to reach out to the people of Pakistan, even during Ramzan. And I think we will have opportunity, because there are some people who are up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock and they watch their television channels for other programs. So I think this is the best that we can do.
So, Saab, since it's a leadership summit and we have a number of leaders present amongst us, a leader always learns the best from the challenges and the crises. Now, if you look at the present administration, you've had your fair share, from dharnas to court cases to whatnot. Looking back, which of these challenges did you find to be most testing, and where you thought that you grew as a leader in your vision of how things actually fall in place?
I think one of the experiences of being in the government over the last 5 years has been unfortunate part is that most often you are trying to cover up things that people have not elected you for. You are trying to be defensive and respond to issues which are not something that have been the concern of the people of Pakistan. I think surely the people of Pakistan would have liked the resolution of the first dharna, for example, which was on the issue of whether the elections of 2013 were free and fair and transparent, whether the trophy was snatched at the last moment by the ruling party.
But do you want to revisit the cover-up bit? You called it the cover-up, things that you needed to cover up.
No, I think in the end, the best thing in both cases, if you look at Panama, if you look at the first dharna, in both cases, I think we went, finally, all the parties, I'm saying, went to the Supreme Court of Pakistan for resolution. And that's the best thing. So nothing gets resolved at the street level. There is a process which is defined, and let me also share very candidly, because most of the people here are educated people, and they must emphasize on their leadership also, whoever they like, that the rules of the game are defined before the game starts. They are not redefined after the game has taken place and you find yourself on the losing side, and then you start complaining whether the post-match process of resolution is good enough or not. So if someone has an issue today in terms of how the electoral conflicts need to be resolved, they need to be raised today and addressed today and ensured that all those things are there. I mean, like for example, there will always be issues. Elections take place. I am not satisfied. I have lost. There is a process which is defined. There was a process which was defined in 2013 that you have to go within 45 days to a tribunal with your complaint, with the kind of things that you need to go to the judge of the High Court. And that was defined. So, and certainly afterwards you are saying this 45 days is not enough, this forum is not good enough, and so on and so forth. So even if you find there is a weakness today, and that's what we keep emphasizing, that please, the process needs to, it's like a cricket match, a 2020 match. You lose, and then afterwards you say that the pitch was not good. I mean, if the pitch was not good, you should not have played in the first place. And if you think
How are
that
you
the-
looking at the pitch for 2018? Do you think it's good?
I think for the first time, and by the way, in 2013, we did not prepare the pitch. Let me be very candid about it. We were not the government at the time, and even in 2008, the leadership had come back from exile, so we did not prepare the pitch. The pitch was prepared by the party in power and by the neutral government or whoever was responsible for various things. I think the pitch is more or less, I'm not obviously talking about comparison with Western Europe or United States. Even in United States, Trump, having won the elections, still complained that 3 million votes were bogus. So, I mean, the complaints still come. So Pakistan, one would expect that there would be issues. But I think on a grand scale, on a macro level, what Pakistanis need to learn, and that is the essence of democracy, is to concede defeat. If you are not prepared to concede defeat, then you are missing the basic essence of democratic process.
After 2 almost complete democratic terms, Zubair Sahib, it is being noticed that once again we see a surge in hatred, in intolerance. Suddenly, you know, that space where you could openly comment and you could come out and express your political differences, that seems to be receding. What do you feel is the cause for that?
I think, let me narrate because this is extremely important. In 2013, much before the elections, in an informal debate, this is something that few leaders were sitting and we raised the issue that extremism was at its peak at that time. Not just in the mindset, but physically. Bombs were exploding all over Pakistan. Karachi was in tatters, like what Mr. Hassan Iqbal mentioned. The most, if not the most dangerous, one of the 3 most dangerous places. But the mindset, Pakistan from a liberal, tolerant society had completely different to a society which was intolerant, not ready to appreciate each other's point of view, whether on a sectarian basis or religious basis or political basis or ethnic basis. And we thought that this is Pakistan's #1 problem going forward. This is this most serious existential threat to Pakistan. And something needs to be done to make it more tolerant, to bring back, to get back the space for a tolerant Pakistan, the kind of tolerant Pakistan that we wished back in 1947 to have, the kind of Pakistan that Quaid-e-Azam wanted to see. So what we decided, we said by 2018, and this is extremely important and give me just 2-3 minutes to share with the audience. We said when a term will end in 2018, if we had changed the basic character of Pakistan over the last 5 years, over the next 5 years, then I think we should be very happy that at least from a serious existential threat, we have brought Pakistan to a country which is not completely tolerant in the sense that we would like to have, but far, far better than what we have. So one, on the physical front, we have to do things like, for example, what we did, and it was part of the plan to undertake operation in Karachi. We undertook operation in Karachi. We started within 2 months, and we did not start by just telling the rangers or the police to start operations. We brought every stakeholder on board. We created consensus. We made a commitment that we will not interfere. And this is the proudest achievement I can tell you, that not once over the last 5 years We have interfered with the law enforcement agencies not once. And this was a city where, because of the political reasons, the federal government or the provincial government looked the other way, even when there was murder and loot and plunder going around, and it was happening in Karachi, for example. And for the rest of the country, we said we need to initiate operation, which we did in June 2014 in the form of Survey Azab.
Right.
Let me be very candid, let me be very straight, that we respect, and the major contribution came from the armed forces of Pakistan. But please, the armed forces of Pakistan was ready to initiate operation much before 2013. They were conscious of the serious, they knew how serious this threat is, and they were begging the government of Pakistan to allow them to initiate operation. But who was holding it back? The political government. Whether the political government had the will to undertake the first difficult step. We took that in Karachi, we took that in the rest of the country. So from a physical standpoint, we are 90% better today in terms of the stats than we were back in 2013.
Right.
The city of Karachi, let me complete
But Zubair
that.
Sahab, you're
No,
speaking
no, I
about
have to- I have
terrorism
to
and
take-
radicalization. I meant when I said that there is
I'm coming to
the
that.
political sphere. There's less and less room to actually speak out about our differences there. Like you've had this recent madness of ink and shoes being thrown and hurled. Where and how is this coming around?
But I was coming to the mindset part. So having done the physical part, the more difficult part was the mindset part. And we thought, how do we do that? First, the leadership must show some actions, must have some symbolic things to show that we are ready to change this country and take those tough decisions. And I'll mention, and I do that openly, and there's no one else, other political parties who are even willing to talk in an audience like this. Forget about electronic media. When it came to the moment of taking the decision on Mumtaz Qadri, we took the decision. There was fear that there will be a religious backlash, and there was religious backlash. Within 2 weeks after the hanging, we lost in a Gujranwala by-election where we had never lost. We knew the implications. We went ahead because we wanted to show that this country is a moderate country, and we will not be sitting and not taking decision because of the backlash. Professor Salam, Pakistani physician who had won a Nobel Prize in 1970s, no government in the country, including the military government, was ready to recognize him because his faith was different from ours. We did it. All we are asking is, and there are several other instances, all we are asking is that someone, the guy sitting on my right, belonging to another political party, just say that we have done the right thing. But if they're not even willing to do that, then Pakistan will not become a tolerant liberal society. This recent case of Faizabad, if you are jumping the gun, the political opposition on a subject, the decision should have been very clear. Either you are with Mr. Rizvi or you are against him. And all the political opposition was showing was to embarrass the government of Pakistan, even on a subject which is fundamental to the future of Pakistan. And I think politics can be done on all other subjects, but on this particular thing. So I think the difference between fascism and democracy is fascism is one-party state where you cannot understand another political party would have a separate point of view. And your question is very, very important, that all of us have responsibility to contribute to make Pakistan a more liberal, tolerant Pakistan, where every point of view, whether it is sectarian point of view, or whether it is ethnic point of view, or whether it is political point of view, one feels comfortable in airing that point of view and not fear a physical backlash. Of course, I can be criticized. Even today, there will be people sitting in this audience who might not agree to what I have been speaking. But I think Pakistan, fortunately for the entire Pakistani public, this is not a banana republic or a Egypt of Hosni Mubarak, as some leaders continue to call. Here we have 50 electronic channels where everyone has opportunity to go 3 times in the evening to air their point of view. We have print media where you can go and give interviews and make your point of view known. We can go and hold jalsas and take out jaloos and whatever. So I think among the major political leader, if someone decides that in the next half an hour they want to reach out to the rest of the country, they can easily do that without any censorship. So when you have such an opportunity, and plus you have parliament and you have provincial assemblies, district assemblies and all of those things. So in such an environment, I think the lesson is that we must listen to each other, we must appreciate each other's point of view, and we must criticize, and we love to be criticized, by the way. We love to be criticized on the basis of a performance on our policies, so that we have something to respond to. But on generalizations, whether we are in league with Mr. Modi or something like that, I mean, I can't answer anything for that.
Thank you, Zubair Saab. I think we have exhausted our time limit, but I do want to ask you my final question before we part. You mentioned that, of course, there's provision of getting in experts to look after and to advise ministries. But can we perhaps see you contesting mainstream elections in the year 2018?
You want to contest?
No, I was wondering if you'd be interested in that.
Me? You're part of a process. I think let me enjoy what I'm enjoying. If the party thinks that I must fight and contest elections, then I'll have no choice. But for now, I don't think so. That's what.
But you wouldn't volunteer.
I wouldn't volunteer.
Thank you so much, Zubair Saab. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. We ask you to please remain on stage. Now, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, there's a little bit of announcement that I would like your attention. Lunch later for the speakers as well as the members of the corporate Pakistan group. It will be held at the Kehkashan Hall. And ladies and gentlemen, as the lunch session will be coming up shortly, we'd like to remind everyone again, due to our limited amount of time, we ask you to please return back to the ballroom ensemble here at 2 p.m. because there's going to be many more discussions from our great speakers that we're going to deliver. And ladies and gentlemen, next we'd like to invite Mr. Zeshan Qureshi, the Chief Marketing Officer of Q Mobile, to please come on stage to deliver a few words of gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a big round of applause.
Sorry. No, it's fine now. Thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Governor, distinguished guest, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. I know everybody is hungry, and so I would not like to have more than 2 minutes. So I would like to thank you all for this extraordinary event we had today and for joining us. And we had amazing leaders who taught us today that a leader is who knows the way, shows the way, and goes the way. So leadership is not about a title or a designation. As our IT minister said, that leadership is practiced not so much in actions, not so much in words, but as an attitude, as in actions. And I should not be afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep, but an army of sheep led by a lion. So that is a difference a leader can make. So ultimately, leadership is not about glorious crowning acts. It's about keeping yourself focused on a goal and motivated to do their best to achieve, especially when the stakes are very high and the consequences really, really matter. It is about laying the groundwork for others' success and then standing back and letting them shine. So my friends, the true essence of leadership is the greatest investment we can make for our generations to come. And this topic, the leadership and disrupting the future, our national poet Allama Muhammad Iqbal, in a very beautiful couplet, he said that, and I'll recite it and translate for you also. कि वो कल के गम व ऐश पे कुछ हक नहीं रखता. The one is not worthy to have tomorrow's thick and thin. जो आज खुद अफरोज़ व जिगर सोज नहीं है. Who's not motivated and determined to work today. वो कौम नहीं लाए के हंगामाए फरदा. That nation is not worthy to survive. जिस कौम की तकदीर में इमरोज़ नहीं है. Which is not ready to work today to make a better future. So I hope that with this conference, with this leadership talks, we'll be able to work on our imroz, on the essence of readiness to produce better leaders. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Qureshi. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Mr. Muhammad Jawed Akai, the chairman of Martin Dow, to please hand out the token of appreciation to His Excellency, our Governor of Sindh, Mr. Muhammad Zubair. May future collaborations between business sectors and the government continue to be fruitful, successful, and everlasting. Ladies and gentlemen, please give His Excellency a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you so much to our wonderful moderator.